Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it.
Welcome to The First Turn. I'm Hyena.
I'm Llama.
And today we're talking about some Warhammer stuff. We've got General's Handbook is out for pre-order this
New
weekend,
season of Age of Sigmar.
which is awesome. It does feel very much like, more so than just like an update, a seasonal rule pack. It does feel like an actual update to the core rules. And I do hope, looking at it, I hope they do incorporate some of these things as permanent changes, right? Because we always have that as a possibility where you've got a seasonal rule, you can cut or keep whatever you like. We saw that with, what was it, the last season where we had units of renown, basically. The generals' regiments of infantry could like fight in multiple ranks.
Yep.
Right? So if you had a one-inch reach weapon, instead it was, if you're in base-to-base contact with one of your friends who's in base-to-base contact, you are allowed to fight regardless of how far away you are. Well, that's kind of manifested itself as a current iteration of combat ranges, right?
We just got rid of those.
Now it's like no more weapon ranges. You just, if you're within combat, 3-inch range, you get to swing. That's very similar kind of rule evolution from a seasonal, temporary one to a permanent core rule, in the game.
And that might even be, I won't say all, but that might even be part of why they do these seasons. It's like, we're going to test run all these other rules ideas we've had that didn't end up in the final game. And then any of them that feel really good, we'll either keep it or make a modified version of it and stick it permanently in the rules going forward, which is fine.
Well, and especially with like universal stuff, right? I get, the General's Handbook is where your universal spell lores and universal manifestations and prayers and stuff, all that lives, and so you need a new seasonal book to update those.
Yeah.
But some of these were like just no nonsense, just this is a good change. One of my favorite ones is actually for priests, where instead of like declaring a prayer you're going to try and wasting your attempt of that prayer just to bank points, now there's just a universal one that says,
bank points.
I'm just charging up.
Yeah.
I'm not actually going to cast anything with this. Let me just charge up my prayer points. And it's like, boom, that's great. That's like, I don't like the mechanics of prayers very much. I think it's clunky and it takes too long to have value.
Yeah.
But this helps. One other thing that I have with prayers is, just like manifestations and spells and certain abilities that really don't cost you anything because they're free. You get to choose one for your army. Is they're not exactly created equal.
No.
Same kind of thing. Where it's like there are prayers for some armies where it's like, well, your prayers go off on 6s. So it's like, okay,
so you have to charge up
reliably,
for a turn or two.
I have to do it in 2 turns. But then in this season, we saw that everyone that got a prayer lore, pretty much across the board, those prayers were valuable. They were impactful.
Yep.
There was no wasteful ones, and they all went off on 3s.
Yeah.
It's like a 3?
Usable like immediately.
That's insane. Yeah. Like that's an every turn ability. That's a most turns ability. Whereas the other ones were, if you're lucky and you roll average, you get it in 2.
Yep. Twice a game, pretty much.
That's rough. And so like I'd like to see some flattening, some normalization of prayers to make them so that they're very similar in the ones that are in the same power level brackets, make them the same kind of casting values.
Well, and something to consider is also what the army has available to them for priests can affect that.
Yeah.
That should be baked into the cost of those, because you were talking earlier about this before we went on, in that there are some armies that have these priest 2, and so they can actually spend one to stockpile points and another one to cast a really good prayer. And so that maybe needs to be baked into some of those costs now.
And a lot of them, I think some of them are. So, if you're a wizard 2 or a priest 2, you usually do cost a lot more. And it's mostly reserved for usually like named characters that are like the more powerful versions. There's a few wizard 2s that are generic, but not many. I can't think of a wizard 2 or a priest 2 generic character off the top of my head.
Generic? I don't know. Yeah, might only be the named ones.
Yeah. So it's, when it comes to a named character, they are generally more expensive than the generic versions, which they should because they are better, even though they lose access.
Although Rodriguez is cheaper than a Great and Clean one.
Yeah, that one's a weird
and
one.
And now Rodriguez is amazing.
And the new Rodriguez is insane. He might have gotten the best War Scroll of
biggest glow up.
Because every one of his abilities are they're just good.
Yeah.
They just do stuff. It's just damage on damage. It's synergies on his own abilities. It's, he's fighty now. Like he's just great. Rodriguez might have gotten the best rework. I think sneakily, the most recent one we got, which was the Soulblight Grey
Which,
Lords.
by the way, everyone's army has now received a seasonal patch.
Yeah, and again, not equivalents. Some of them got better, updates than the others, but maybe because they needed them. Some of them weren't needed, and some of them were new units that they just came out with. They got a second version, which was a little weird. I expected there to be a focus on problematic units or units that were getting underrepresented, underplayed.
So,
and some of it just wasn't that.
Yeah.
So
some of it was trying to fit a theme or give an army a new way to build or a new module to put in their army. So if we were to say the single unit or single model that got the biggest boost by this, Rodriguez has got to be up there as one of them.
Yeah, he's top 3.
What would you say for overall army got the best?
Daughters of Cain.
Daughters of Cain.
Yeah, because they got a prayer lore that was all super easy to cast, and they were all really good. And one of their chariots is amazing, like Monster Hunter now, which is the snake on the chariot. Cauldron of Blood.
Okay.
Is that what it's called? I think so. It's the one with the Lamia riding the top. That one is super good now. It's ridiculous. And then I think maybe Seraph and Sneaky got a good one overall because they have a new army rule that you give up on the bites that we were talking about before, that being really, really good on the Saurus, but you gain 2 of your asperisms instead of 1, which are the overall army rules of +1 to cast and +2 movement for your army.
Army rules are so good.
So there's the attachment that gives you 2 of them to start off with instead of 1. Which is really good. It's really good. So that was just a general really good change.
And you felt maybe the army that got the weakest,
probably Soulblight
was probably the last one. Which
they also just got their book, and so they didn't Did we need another corpse cart that was worse than the first one? Probably not. Did we need an alternate version of a named character who I thought was really good before, but completely changes the playstyle of it in this one? Probably not.
Why wasn't that in the book?
Yeah, she was fine. She's still she's like the squishiest vampire.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's fine. Their spell lore didn't. I think they got a spell lore. I'm pretty sure they did.
I'd say she looks more brittle than squishy. Brittle. Yeah. She's dried out. She's not going to be.
But yeah, I think theirs was pretty weak.
Yeah.
And then was it Idneth? No, Idneth was pretty good. There was another one that was really kind of mediocre.
I was pleased with our in-house favorite Slaves to Darkness one because it was interesting. They took Abraxia, my lady, and they made her specifically better as a solo than she was before. Because before she hinged entirely on providing special rules to Varengard, who really didn't need much help anyway, and then you had to put this giant pie plate based character next to them to get it to work. And then she was okay in combat, sure. She can solo a lot of heroes. But you took her so that your Varengard could fight twice immediately. And that's a 1,000-point module.
Yeah.
Now they made it so, hey, here's a version where you can take her with anything, because on her own, she's just going to kick ass.
Well, she's that, and if she's teaming up with a unit that's trying to take an objective, she gives them an undivided unit. Because there's so few units now that have marks, the pledges to chaos. Most units are undivided.
Yep.
And so you can just be like, hey, this unit right here, have +1 rend while you're trying to steal this objective.
Well, and
that's huge.
And that synergizes with Chaos Warriors, which weren't getting played as much as, say, Chosen, because Warriors already have rules revolving around objectives. And now you can do this where she's like, hey, now you rend better on the objective. And now Warriors themselves can also buff Dark Oath indirectly through that new detachment or battalion.
So I think it's a super good way to play now, where you take, Warriors get the mark, the Warriors get a different unit of Warriors get a banner to give them a different mark. And then you've got a pile of Dark Oath units that you can be like, here, 2 of you have the mark that I have, go nuts.
All of a sudden on these little squishy, cheap bodies, now they've got a couple of buffs.
Well, and you're not worried
which they needed.
You're not worried about throwing your army building special rule on that unit.
Yeah.
Right, because even if they die, the war unit still has the ability, And so I was looking at something like Slanesh, where like you take a unit of Slanesh that can give Dark Oath now, charge on 3d6, dropping the lowest, but charge on 3d6 now to make him a little better. I took one where I gave just a ass kicker unit that is the a reinforced unit of warriors with the eroding icon, which is the Nurgle one, and then you take a sorcerer to give them ocular visions if you need to, because they like the icon gives them Mark of Nurgle, which is a 6-up ward save just innately, and the icon gives them immune to criticals. So there's no critical effects on any attacks that target them. So you're like trying to fish for crit mortals and stuff on them won't do anything. Yeah. Kind of a big deal. And like being able to throw out ward saves onto Dark Oath, 2 Dark Oath units at a time is not bad. Nope. You can synergize that with an artifact that gives non-Warriors of Chaos units a 6-up ward anyway within a bubble, and then you give them the Mark of Nurgle, which improves it to a 5-up, because it specifically says if you already have a 6-up, you gain a 5-up ward. So now you've got Dark Oath units with 5-up wards running around in bubbles, like big units. I don't know. There's just some really good synergies there.
Well, and for that army...
throw in a dark... I guess a Demon Prince is a demon. He's not a Warriors of Chaos unit. Right. Scratch that.
Well, and for that army, which while it was performing well, was the opposite style of build. You took very few total models in these big Death Star units. You took a Brick of Chosen, you took a blob of Varangard, and then a couple of characters. Now it's like, well, this gives you a way to run piles of Warriors in Dark Oath. Yep. And win objective, attrition, whatever, and do a sneaky amount of damage because you're getting rend out of nowhere. And
yeah. I was doing another build where you take Abraxia for the extra rend. The banner I took actually was the Undivided banner. So I was giving up a mark on a unit, reinforced unit of Ogroids, the Theridans.
Oh yeah.
Because a 6-man unit of that with an extra rend and a +1 damage once per turn, fighting after their character, who gives them +1 to hit.
The Myrmidon, yeah.
And then the Dread banner makes it so that the enemy cannot use commands. So you get extra rend, extra attack, extra hit, and then the opponent can't all out defense when they're near you. So it's like that unit's going to die.
Not only is it going to die, but that was the function that Chosen and Varangard filled, was point-click delete.
Right.
And now they've brought the Ogroids down in points enough, and you can do some of these synergies where for far less expensive than your 600-point unit, you now get one that still cracks pretty hard.
It's pretty solid. There's a lot of like really good little synergy things you can do, especially with these new updates they got from the Gyron update. But that's kind of how every army's kind of...
Every army.
You know, it's like, here's a character that does something completely different than they used to. We didn't delete the old unit. We don't delete the old, war scroll for this character. You have an option now. Instead of releasing another character model, have an alternate version of that model. And it enables all kinds of new... new builds.
That's a big point you just made. Instead of them waiting for, say, a battle tome to come around, and they build a new character, new lore, new rules, new model for just a character, and then it like functionally is very similar to another one you already have, but then just does something slightly different. Now instead of doing that, they're like, here's 2 ways to play a character you already have.
Yep.
Here's 2 ways to play a unit you already have.
And I like that on like units where you're only bringing one anyway.
Yep.
So I don't have to worry about like, I have to commit to bringing this version of the War Scroll for all
3 or whatever.
Every unit of this type, right? Because that could kind of hurt, right? Where it's like, say they did like Liberators, right? If they did Liberators, and you wanted to play a bunch of Liberators or Clan Rats, something like that, where it's like, okay, well, you either play Liberators that have a 3-up save with their shield and their Warhammers, or the other version is a more offensive version of Liberator and as an alternate War Scroll. You have to commit to all your Liberators doing this, where you have a 4-up save instead, but they're more damage output.
Right.
I'd be like, man, that's a tough choice. But with like a character, it's like, I was going to bring one of this character anyway. I don't have to worry about giving up the other version of the War Scroll. So, or like a unique character. You can only play one anyway, so it doesn't matter if it's an alternate. So, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely interesting. The new book itself has a lot of cool stuff in it. Like I said, universal stuff that everyone can take advantage of.
Have we seen all of it yet?
There have been some reviews that have gone out and kind of spoiled most of it.
It's here in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. And so, like, the embargo's been lifted and videos are coming out. Like I said, the big highlights are universal stuff, things like, unlimited just charge up prayers, new terrain features almost. So there's like a new quality for a new definition for one of the terrain qualities, which is obscuring, which I think is going to shake things up a lot. Because obscuring now is
Rhino was talking to me about that yesterday.
It's kind of ridiculous, and I think they're going to have to make a change to it. I don't think it's going to. The way they've released it, I think, is a little too much. I could see them hot fixing it because people won't be happy with it, especially if you play an army that has any amount of shooting in it.
So looking at you,
like
Caradron Overlords, Disciples of Tzeentch, some Lumineth builds,
Wizard heavy armies too,
Yeah.
because it's so what obscuring does now is if you're within range of the thing that's obscuring, whichever qualifies you for being an obscuring, right? Like being on an objective, you're obscured.
There's some that'll be obscured,
right?
Yeah.
But some terrain features, you'll have to be wholly within 1 inch of it, the entire unit, which can be difficult. And it doesn't apply to units that either fly or are monsters, kind of how like Wildwoods did.
Yeah.
But the issue with that is some units, some armies are just, they all fly. And so it's like, you don't get to take advantage of any of this obscuring stuff.
No.
Or like units now that fly are a liability. Now, if it were the other way around where a flying unit doesn't get the benefit, but they also ignore the benefits of their opponent, because that's how some of that stuff was too, then maybe there was a counter to obscuring. But as it stands right now, it's just, if you don't fly and you're an obscuring, you are not visible.
Yeah, I think this in combination with some of the little army rules that we got makes me feel a little bit like they do want to maybe give infantry some more importance, or non-monstrous, non-flat, like regular ground stuff, which I don't know if I'm ever disappointed in. I feel like those are some of the safest units to give changes to or buffs to, because they otherwise don't do a whole lot. But that could be big. But you and I were talking also about this obscuring rule and how it reminded us of sort of the magic box days of 40k.
Yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with that, the magic boxes were like terrain pieces that double dipped on some of the terrain rules. So, for example, a piece of terrain that is a ruins allows for infantry to move through them freely.
Yeah.
The walls of ruins do not stop infantry. But there were also like rules that prevented bigger units from climbing up on them. You could only be on the bottom floor.
Yep.
And so there were like two kinds of magic boxes. One where like infantry would be inside of the bottom floor of a building, just far enough away from the walls so that the enemy units couldn't get into combat range, which is 1 inch of the unit, but they were close enough to the wall that a model couldn't fit in the building with them, basically making that unit invulnerable because
couldn't be seen, couldn't be touched.
It couldn't be touched. You couldn't charge it, but then it could have line of sight on you through windows or whatever and shoot at you, but you couldn't get to it.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with like third floor vantage points on ruins. So like an Imperial Knight that stands taller than the ruin couldn't attack the unit on the top floor because the distances were measured base to base and combat range was only 5 inches vertically.
Yeah.
And so if you were 6.5 inches up, the knight who you're staring dead in the face with your missile launcher or las cannon or whatever with your unit, staring him right in the eyes, whose chainsword could reach 20 or 30 feet above the unit, is not allowed to attack that unit. Magic boxes.
Yeah, right? And so these units were invincible.
And so this feels a little bit like that. If you have a shooting unit that doesn't have shoots in combat,
which very few do,
a unit in an obscuring piece of terrain is immune to your shooting. You can never shoot that unit, which is like if you were 3 inches away, a little over 3 inches away, which is combat range, you still cannot see or target this unit with spells or abilities or like spells or shooting. That's a little silly. But guess what? If that unit that is in there has shooting attacks, they can shoot you. Albeit at half of their normal
range,
weapon range, but they can still shoot you and you cannot shoot them. That's a bit of a problem. Especially, like I said, if your unit revolves around shooting and you don't have shoots in combat, the only way you see them is if you're in combat with them. Well, if you can't shoot in combat because you lack that special rule, you can't actually do your shooting.
No, so you're just punching them.
So imagine a scenario where every piece of terrain is obscuring, every enemy unit is in an obscuring piece of terrain and is obscured, and you have shooting units. They can literally do nothing. That's problematic.
Yeah, they can run around.
If it were something like you're obscured, you're not visible to enemy units unless they're within 6 inches of you, which is double combat range, then it's like, okay, there's some counterplay there, right? Like I can get within 3 inches of combat range, and then now I can finally target.
Yeah, that would be like a fog of war,
right?
which would be better.
That's dangerous. That is so close to an enemy unit, especially if it's a melee one, where it's like there's a melee unit obscured. I need to be able to shoot at them. Let me get within 6 inches of them. That is risky, but at least it's not completely, impossible. You know, like I don't know. It feels like it's a little too much. We'll see. We'll see what they decide to do. People might be like, this is bullshit. We're not going to play it like this. We're going to house rule it to something that's more interactive. Because that's the problem, is it's like it's not interactive. Your enemy's corn army now does everything it wants to do because you can't target it with your shooting attacks. They're balanced around losing some, like taking some casualties by the time they get to you. But this new season makes it
and your unit is priced higher because it has a shooting attack, and now none of that makes sense.
So no, it's just the season where we don't shoot, we don't cast prayers,
we're in dense forest everywhere.
I don't know. We'll see. Especially because some units are like, we're jungle fighters.
Yeah.
And you can't shoot.
Yep.
Like, are you kidding? So yeah, we'll see.
I think it's big because there are so many rules in the Age of Sigmar game.
Tell you who comes out really good on this? Rodriguez. Because his thing is just, are you within range of me? Take mortal damage.
Yeah.
I don't need to see you.
No.
Just be in my aura.
Because what I was just about to say is that so many rules in Age of Sigmar include the word visible. And this obscuring, all of a sudden, like, well, don't get
and visibility is not just for shooting. It's for fighting. It's for
spells,
all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Rodriguez would be even better there. He's like, oh, you're just within so distance. Take
more ones.
Take stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
So we still have a couple things we don't know yet. There's supposed to be a points update alongside, and then we are supposed to see some points for a few of the endless spells.
Endless spells and potentially even
faction terrain.
Faction terrain are going to cost points.
Because we talked a few weeks ago, in case anyone was listening, that those are just not only not created equal, but it's hilariously lopsided. And I think people were okay with it because it was just one thing you could play in the game once, and it was for free for everybody. But we talked, of course, about what the Seraphon faction terrain does, for example, compared to everybody else's.
Right. So it was fine when it was endless spells. Right,
Yep.
I want to say that it felt bad that your faction spells were just worse than the general ones, because I feel like it should be the other way around. The universal ones should be weaker.
They should be generic
than specific spells that a faction can take. And look at Soul Blights. Soul Blights are hilarious. There is a version of every Soul Blight spell in a generic lore that are just twice as good as each of those spells. It's really funny. Like Emerald Lifeswarm is so much better than like the Summon the Undead. Or summon the crypt of the undead, the dead vampire, and heal a vampire for a little bit. Like, Lifeswarm is so much better than that.
Yep.
We
had some like the 4-spell one, which included Purple Sun, or like the Kronspine Incarnate.
Yep.
Where it's like they're like 2/3 of the factions in the game don't even have endless spells that are anywhere close to those. So you just took those.
Yep. Or the Slaves of Darkness ones were hilariously bad too.
Yep.
There's like you summon a sigil that shoots, but it can't shoot in the turn that it comes in because the range is too short.
Yep.
But you could have just taken Burning Head and fired twice as many shots on the turn it came in.
Yeah.
Instead. Like, I'll just go for that, thanks.
By the way, same cost.
Same cost, 0. So like there needs to be some rebalancing of those, and those need to be redone.
But we haven't had that leaked yet, right?
No,
so we don't know what.
I mean, we know there was a change to one of them. That was the Foot of Gork, because it was really weird how it was worded. About that was the the 2 orc factions.
Mm-hmm.
Their endless spells are the same. And so, like, the Foot of Gork with where it stomps across the battlefield was weird in terms of like, how do you actually place these? Can these actually be placed in combat? Can they be placed? You have to charge. Like, it was just really weird how you actually activated that spell. And so they did a little bit of clarification on how those are used. So there are some changes like that.
And now these are all going to be on cards.
Yeah,
finally.
There's also going to be changes to how the battle tactics works. There's changes to how the scenarios work. Obviously, they're going to be very different. Objectives are going to be very, very different because they come in like pairs that you have to capture at the same time.
And good on Games Workshop for finally deciding that with a rules pack with an edition of a game, they're going to include their own objectives, and you don't have to go to a third party to buy them.
Yep. So yeah, I like all of that. All of that sounds really good to me. But I also like just the precedent. If it continues, I think there's room for better improvements.
I am still, and this is a dead equine that we can kick and kick and kick, is that some of these faction-specific updates flat out improved an entire faction. And it was like, why wasn't this in...
Why was it just in their battle tome?
In their battle tome.
Yeah.
What are you doing with the battle tomes that you need to release these seasonal things that actually add flavor?
Right. Which is unfortunate, because it's like, a lot of them felt like you added nothing, but you were holding on to the actual changes for this. I don't know.
Granted, these were free downloads,
yeah.
but now you have this extra thing.
Yep.
You have to bookkeep a little bit. On the 40k front, we get Chaos Knights.
Yeah. So they finally, I don't even say finally, just kind of out of nowhere, been like, oh, next week, Chaos Knights.
Yep.
Got your codex. I think there's a new kit for one of the War Dog units, and then there's going to be a new...
Well, there's a... not a combat patrol, whatever they call it. Might be
a battle force or something.
That's just War Dogs.
Yeah.
And then their core Chaos Knight kit is receiving another variant.
Okay.
It's same. The Imperial Knight one's doing the same thing. Here's
Gotcha.
another variant on the base kit.
I thought there was a War Dog, another War Dog variant they were coming out with too, but I don't remember. It was like there was such a flurry of like Warhammer 40k news that it's like I can't keep a track. I don't remember right now.
Well, in the Spacewolf thing, people are starting to get their hands on that box set, but the army proper's not out yet.
Right.
And you're right in terms of a flurry of news, so much so that it was like, hey, we have released today to start Warhammer Community off in the morning new matched play legal rules for a faction in Age of Sigmar. 3 minutes later, it's bumped down an article because of a 40k Black Library release.
Yep. And and that is one thing where I'm like, if I could say one thing to the folks at Warcom, it would be slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Some days. And also give AOS a minute to shine for once. Because you're right. There's this big summer campaign thing that's going on for this General's Handbook, and all these news are coming out for the series, the Gyren series. Every time an article comes out, it's on the front page for 3 minutes, and it gets bumped down by 4 other articles of bullshit. I'm gonna say it is bullshit, because it's like, hey, remember the army we released 4 armies ago? Here's a little like unnecessary lore bit about them, and
or
how
here's
to
a
paint
tactics
them.
bit from one of our studio players.
And it's like, why was that necessary to kick it down 4 spots?
Yeah.
And also, like, why is this big events banner, like, why do I have to scroll 2 full pages down to find it? You know what I mean? Like,
because they've stickied the new Horus Heresy edition to the top half of the page.
Exactly. That's just like, it's every single year we see this. Here's an update. We don't give it any visibility. We bump it and bump it and bump it. And it's like, for once, let it stick to the top. Let it be on the top. Let it be on the top banner.
Just like chapter approved, General's Handbook's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially like the 0.5 of an edition when those come out. And you're giving it, each army came out and were never at the top of your page for more than an hour. And before you had them bumped down by a few articles. And these are match play legal changes.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's the stuff most people pay attention to. But I feel like they've done that in 4th edition. It was like all this hype for the launch of it, then radio silence, then we're caught up on the rumors, and then now no article time.
Yep.
when new match play updates come out. Hey, we're going to talk to you about how objectives in the new version of Age of Sigmar plays. 10 minutes later, it's 3 articles underneath Black Library painting and
including a fucking, here's an update to the match play rules for Middle Earth. It's like, why was it necessary to do on the same day? Because guess what? Nothing else happened on other days.
No.
Those articles stopped and they were done. You could have released this tomorrow and not bumped this fucking article out. It's weird.
It could be, I wonder if it's
also your skirmish version, Warcry. We're not going to talk about it anymore.
Nope.
It's going on like what, 15 months since we've heard something about Warcry.
Nothing. Yeah,
it's insane.
I have. I mean, it could be something as simple as their studio might have several different teams. They have deadlines, and then 3 of them come in at the same time, and they just post them, which is poor management.
Yeah,
project management is it? But yeah, I mean, it is our game. We have a bias.
I do.
I don't like it when it's like, well, we see by the numbers, the tournament turnouts, the sales results, and it's like, the game's doing great, but so give it some time on your page, damn it. Those articles are gone, and I have to look for them the same day they went up.
Yep.
Yeah. By the way, do we know of any new models coming out anytime
We
soon?
know that there's one new character for Idoneth Deepkin.
He makes 2 versions.
It makes 2 versions.
Yeah.
It's the same
But
freaking
it's the same
character,
model,
though.
yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that was because we saw a banner like studio staged photos for the Sons of Behemoth
Yeah.
that had these new models in it for Idoneth, which was weird that that's the ones that had the new models, which means to me that they should have been released already.
They exist.
You know, they're like, whoops, we didn't realize we didn't release these yet. Or they're already in the studio photos.
Whoops.
But there is another character that we saw in that photo that was not the alternate version of the guy we saw.
Okay.
And then there was some sort of like, it almost looked like a Lord of Change face kind of thing in a wave. I mean, it wasn't a Lord of Change, but it kind of looked like that.
New Endless Spells.
Where it
probably.
might have been Endless Spell, or I mean that's likely. It's
Yeah.
Endless Spell.
'Cause
Kind
do
of
they
thing.
have those for their army?
No, they don't.
No.
They have their terrain piece, which is the boat,
Yeah.
but no Endless Spells. And so that's likely what it is. They said
2 characters.
They
in
said
Endless Spells.
they said in the thing that there was more coming.
Okay.
I know there are rumors that are like all over the place.
They might have a bigger
but-
release than that. We'll see.
But some of the rumors were like, they were going to be more sea monster-y kind of things of units, not endless spells. I know people are looking for more turtles or crabs or something. I mean, I know personally I want Achillean infantry on foot, which are the elite kind of elves, as opposed to like the undead, like soul puppet versions of the thralls, those elves, which, I mean, they've definitely shifted their focus on like what the basic infantry for Idoneth Deep can do. And so like having like a generalist, more elite infantry unit on foot to go along maybe with a new infantry character who's an Achillean, because they do like to do keyword based synergies.
Yep.
Right. And there are some units that are there are already units there who synergize with the thralls. There's like the Thrall Master, obvious. That's the one I think you were eyeing for a project.
I am eyeing.
And then there's another character, I forget what he's called, but he's got like a hook and a noose kind of thing, and he like captures people. He synergizes with them because he
Dog catcher?
brings kind of, but he kind of like brings their models back and like buffs them. So like there's already buffed support for the Thrall units. I don't know what this Achillean on foot, who's pretty fighty, but I don't know what like who he's supposed to be leading and joining and
could be a unit
fighting alongside.
that he provides buffs
So
to.
it would be nice. I think it'd be super cool. We've seen some Achilleans on foot through like Underworld already,
Yeah.
who like lead or who were like.
How much of a bummer would it be
help
if they
out the
just
characters.
include that unit?
That'd be so unfortunate. I mean, and like I wouldn't be mad if they did generic versions of these Underworld war bands for every army. If you're not,
that'd be great.
If you're going to retire them from Underworlds, at least make them available. Like we saw a spearhead for Seraphim that has one of the Underworld war bands in it. The Claws of Itzel, I think is what they're called.
Mhm.
Now that unit has gotten sent to Legends, so
Yeah.
I bet there will be a generic version of it, similar to what's it called? There was a unit in the Plague Pack in Skaven, which is the only place you get your Plague Priest anymore on foot. There's a non-hero generic unit that is a Priest 1. That's odd.
Well, I actually wouldn't be surprised if that does become universal, where these Legends, Underworlds, war bands have a generic version in the battle tomes. Cheap way to expand the army.
The Storm Coven.
They probably can't be reinforced.
Nothing. Yep, correct. There was one called a Storm Coven, which was Donatar's Storm Coven in Underworlds. Donatar, something like that. Domitan. Doesn't matter. But now it's just called a generic version of it called a Storm Coven, which is a unit of 3. It's a wizard 1. It has like a shooting attack with its stabs. It might be one of the best shooting units in the game, honestly. It's kind of ridiculously good. Because it's like the whole unit, because one's a champion, I believe. I think it's like 7 attacks for the unit at 4s, 3s, -1 D3. That's a pretty good shooting attack. That's pretty solid.
Now, is Idoneth Deepkin a soft spot army for you? Do you have are they one of your babies? I mean, I know you own every army, but like,
so of the armies that have been released specifically for Age of Sigmar, you're both dwarf units. You had the Idoneth, you had the Lumineth. You had Cities of Sigmar, kind of, because like the human stuff is all new.
Yep.
I mean, obviously you have your Stormcast. It was for this game. I think of all the bespoke armies for this game, I think Idoneth is the most interesting and the coolest. So I do have a little bit of a soft spot for it.
Well, it's like Age of Sigmar itself. It is one of their unique setting, unique ideas, and I would hate to see them abandon it so quick. So if the rumors are that they are getting more than just the 2 heroes, that would be great.
Yep.
They really need it. Even if they have to pull a Necrons where the lore changes a bit to fit better what they want it to do, I don't
it'll be
care.
Fine.
Like,
and then we're all supposed to be getting Nighthaunt in a very similar time span.
yeah. But we're caught up, right? Still caught up.
Still caught
in
up.
Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
We don't know what's next.
Yeah. I mean, when they released that last roadmap, Idneth and Nighthaunt were under the now category.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's 2 months ago, guys. Like, when is now? What do you mean?
You mean the quarter? Is it?
Yeah. There are some interesting things, though, that I was thinking about with them. There are quite a few things. So, it's weird. So, Nighthaunt, with this new season, are going to be in a weird spot. Because none of their infantry, which they are all infantry, can take advantage of the obscuring. Because they all fly.
They all have the
Which
fly
is
keyword.
so weird to me, because that means that unit is screwed. You would think that ghosts could hide in a spooky forest the best, right? These ghosts cannot hide at all with its obscuring terrain.
They do all have wards, though.
They have wards. No.
Yeah.
Yes, they have a weak ward, and they've got unrunnable saves.
Yeah.
But they can't hide in these forests. But they have units of crossbows that they just recently got. You remember those crossbow units? Like a 12-inch range or whatever. But they can target units that they cannot see. So, like, I think there's a world where you can play some of the, what do they call, the Coven Guard or something like that? These, like, crossbow units for the ghosts. Because they have a shooting attack that ignores line of sight and ignores visibility. And now, like, your opponent's thinking they're going to be able to hide. But in reality, it's like, I can still target you. So they might like overextend and put their units that they think are hiding too far up, and now you can just pick them off. I don't know. It's just some like I said. That's what I like about the kind of this, not really an edition change, a season change.
Yeah.
Is that it does make you think of things that maybe weren't getting play, things that are like interesting and cool that maybe you didn't get a chance to play. Now maybe they've got a spot.
Well, it's a way to change. Whatever, if you think the game had any point of static, anything that was like dull or unchanging, you can do it without just like changing points or releasing all new stuff. I mean, it's like this just changes the way a lot of people are going to have to build their armies in general.
Right.
You get to keep your same stuff.
Which some people are upset about that, but I like it.
Yeah.
I like that aspect. I like that it's like I've had these units forever that I've built and painted that just sit on the shelf because they're unplayable in this current version of the game. Now I can finally pull them out and use them.
At least give them a try.
Or at least try them. I was looking at some of the other units that have come out recently that have just been kind of like bricked when they first came out, and trying to see what use I can find for those. And I think I've found a few, honestly. There was one unit that was in a really weird spot when it first came out. It was a Stormcast unit. It was the Warrior Chamber Griff Riders. Right, because they had the Vanguard Chamber Griff Riders, and then they had the
bird dogs.
The bird dogs.
Yeah.
And then you had the Dragon Riders with the winged dragons. And you had the Dragon Riders with the wingless dragons. There's a lot of different like cavalry units that are kind of like, well, what are the purpose of these? Well, there are some synergy things going on in that army that require you to be Warrior Chamber, and these cavalry units are the Warrior Chamber cavalry units. And so there's like, oh, actually, there is a reason to play them because they do synergize specifically in very specific ways. And it's like, I didn't get any because I was like, when they first came out, it's like, these are just the other cavalry, but worse. They're like, they're literally worse than any other mounted unit. And now I'm thinking, actually, hold on.
And those are the newest ones, right?
Yeah, I might have to get some of them now.
Well, now that they've got a working synergy.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah.
That's neat. Of course, we need to talk about the most important upcoming release, which is the new Blood Bowl Treeman and Sprite.
That Treeman looks good.
It does.
I like the aesthetic of it a lot. Way better than the old Treeman, who's basically a tree stump.
Well, I'll say that about Blood Bowl. The designers are having a blast.
Yeah.
Because it is pure character that's stuffed into a lot of those. But I mean, you have to make so few things.
Yeah.
Every team has their base plastic line, and then they just get to go ham with these characters and solos and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting. I'm kidding, of course, in terms of its importance because it's Blood Bowl, but like, it still looks neat.
Blood Bowl might be one of those games where the model itself matters the least of any game they have, because really it's just you're playing on a checkerboard.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't really matter what the model looks like or what it's armed with or what. It's just literally a token in this regard. Right. So you could play with like coins or bases that just had written on them what they were, because there's no height restrictions. There's no height, width, or there's no line of sights. There's just it's what spot are you occupying, and like what are your keywords. Like that's all that really matters in that game. So it's like, I don't know. It's it's more of a board game than anything. So.
Back to Age of Sigmar.
Yep.
So another thing that's getting updated this go round is not just the match play rules, but also Spearhead.
Right. Yeah. So Spearhead's also they're releasing a few more. Every battle tome has an extra one that they didn't have before. But that Spearhead is kind of getting a new season too. That version of the game. And
Sand and Bone, and the last one's called Fire and Jade.
Yep. So Fire and Jade was when it came out initially. Sand and Bone. Now the setting it's taken to the Realm of Death, sheesh. And so there's a new pack for it with maps and objectives and little pieces of terrain and stuff. I assume it's also going to be like map packs and like scenarios for playing Spearhead.
New battle pack, rules for 4 new Spearhead forces, 36 cards featuring 6 twists, each for the Ossia and Dolorum sides of the board, because the board is 2-sided.
Correct. Yeah.
And 2 decks of 12 battle tactics. I think that's cool. Spearhead has turned out to be maybe the surprise, not so surprise.
I mean, maybe their fastest picked up game mode.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where it's, even Kill Team, right, where you'd buy a box of 10, 15 guys, whatever it was. There were still too many decisions you had to make, right? Yep. Like, what specialists do I want? How do I arm these guys? How am I building this unit out? There's still a lot of decisions to make there. Spearhead, there were no decisions.
Spearhead
you know exactly what the units do. You know exactly how they're armed. Build them how you want. These are the rules for them.
Yeah, and so Spearhead became about people who maybe didn't want to commit fully to getting into another 2,000-point army.
Yeah.
But they wanted to dabble, they wanted to paint, they wanted to try the rules. It's like,
because Spearhead was between 500 and 800 points.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the game size.
And so it's like, well, I just buy one box, and there are no exceptions. Spearhead is you buy one box.
Yep.
And then you get to focus on getting something assembled and painted to a standard you want in a reasonable amount of time. You get to dip into the faction if you want to play larger games, but more importantly, the games of Spearhead are really fast, and you get to just kind of focus on tactics.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people that is super appealing, and so Spearhead has become really popular really quick.
Well, and then each of the Spearheads are kind of designed to be sort of balanced.
Yeah.
Right, because if you just had a 6, let's play a 600-point game of Age of Sigmar. Well, what happens if you bring just 2 models that are 300 points each that are unkillable for your opponent 600 points?
Right.
Like you could cheese the system a little bit at whatever point level to be I'm thinking of how knights used to be, right? When they first came out in 40k.
Yep.
As a faction, all you had was the big knights. So you had an army that was well, here's your force org chart. You're required to pay battle line. You're required to play infantry. You're required to play transports. Knights came out, and it's you ignore all that. You play 4 gigantic knights that are all this high toughness or armor value or whatever, basically immune to a large portion of your opponent's army. And this we're calling balanced.
Yep.
Because the points are the same. And it's we call these skew lists, right? You go to a tournament, you have a list of take all comers, and you play against someone who spams out one unit that is, you need very specific weapons and units to fight, and everything else is useless against them. We call that a skew. There are no skew units. There are no skew armies. There are no skew lists in Spearhead, because you don't get to choose anything as the player. These are already combined packages of units that you don't get to alter. It's here, these are balanced against one. They just play this, tactically use it in the game, as opposed to list building the way into victory. It's a very
so in Spearhead, similar to Underworlds, I guess, there's no list building.
Yeah,
you buy the box, that's what you get.
Yep.
And I like that. That's tempting to me always to pick up Spearheads because the price isn't that bad, and there's a lot of other factions models that look cool that I don't want to buy.
Yeah, wouldn't really commit to it. I mean, for me, it's the same thing with Regiments of Renown, right? That's another thing where it's you don't get to make any choices. You get to include this module in your list building, into your army, but it's balanced because you don't get to just say well, you can just take this X number of points of this other army.
Which I think was a weakness in some of their attempts at doing allied or mercenary systems before.
Yeah.
Now instead it's like, no, you buy this unit that does a very specific it's sort of Dogs of War-ish.
Yeah.
But it's like you take this unit that does a very specific thing, you can't modify it, and your army can't do anything to buff it.
Right.
You get this unit that does exactly this thing. And Spearhead, it's that same thing. Because it's interesting, when you remove the list building side, then it comes entirely down to tactics, decision-making on the tabletop.
Yeah. So, and I really liked with the Allies thing they're doing now in 4th edition, that they are having these, whatever's for hire units that can cross factions. I love that. That's my favorite thing they've done so far. Where they've said, here are these very small regiments of renown that can be taken. Yeah, it's a Trog, or it's chaos ogres, whatever they're called. Ogroids. There you go. But this version of it is taken in destruction armies.
Also the name for when you have really, really big hemorrhoids.
Yeah.
They're ogroids.
Or it's like, hey, here is this unit of profiteering space or sky dwarves. And who do they work for? Anybody. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if they're an order faction. These guys are just out for money, and they'll work for anybody. You can hire them for chaos. You can hire them for Skaven can hire them. Like, whatever. Super cool ways to expand out and provide more ways to play. I hope they continue that. I hope the ones they released here recently, over around Christmas last year, they had these regiments. I hope they continue that and they keep those, because those kind of things spark my creativity. I love them because it doesn't really matter what faction they came from, honestly, in my opinion. You can whip up something to stand in place of them that just works for your army. It's there's some creativity there in the modeling side. Like I said, I've come up with all kinds of ways to Skavenify those regiments. Honestly, oh, you're a big troll with a guy leading him. Sounds like a packmaster and a giant ogre to me.
Yep.
Rat ogre to me. Giant rat ogre to me. That kind of thing. I was trying to figure out what to kit bash a Gargant into a rat ogre. That kind of thing.
Remember, kids, everything
is a rat
can be a rat ogre.
Absolutely.
I'll be interested to see, once the General's Handbook is legal, those tournament results that start coming out, because we're still seeing the ones right now that don't include the new updates. But I'll be interested to see if some lists get built around all this stuff.
Yeah.
I think in 2 weeks, we have a holiday coming up on that weekend that I think is important to a lot of men in the gaming community, and that's Nature Photography Day.
Yep. Oh, that one. Yeah. Yep.
There's nothing like a day to appreciate taking photos of things in nature, because we know gamers spend most of their time outside.
Yep. Grass is their favorite thing, and they can't help but touch it.
If they throw money at anything in this world, it is to conservation.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
And taking quality photos of things that they consider a hobby that they're passionate about, like bees and deer crossings.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So that's one that I think that'll be a special day. We'll have an episode on that weekend where we really celebrate what that's all about.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Sure. Why not? But yeah, we've got we do have holidays coming up, though. We got our Independence Day holiday coming up next weekend.
Not next weekend. Next month. We're in June.
Oh. Is that? Oh.
It's still in July.
Oh.
Independence Day's still in July.
I thought we moved it up.
No.
Okay.
It's not like Easter where it rotates Sundays or whatever. Yeah. Nope.
Always on a Sunday?
Always on the 4th.
Okay.
So, yep.
Oh, shit. It is June.
It's June. But think about that for a second. We are almost halfway through 2025 already.
No. I don't want to think about that.
Because I always do that thing every year. I'm like, well, I'm going to do my Christmas shopping throughout the year so I don't get stuck in November going, oh, no.
For me, it's more like I can't wait to start on my Golden Demon project for next year. And we're already 3 months out. 3 months into the year. It's like, oh, my God. The year starts at...
Adepticon is the start of the miniature fiscal year.
We're almost 3 months through that year.
Yeah.
And it's like, crap.
Still haven't started.
So I haven't picked a model.
Yeah. I've got a couple in mind, I think, but just got to start them.
Yeah. I mean, I know you had a single character you were trying to think about doing. Did you have a diorama you were thinking about? Was that the other one?
Well, I've got one for AOS I'm thinking I might pinpoint. 40k, I've gone in a couple directions. I always want to do unit. I love the category, and I think you can make some really characterful little 3 or 5 man.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to paint multiple models now to that standard that are kind of the same, and it's hard to paint one model to that standard, let alone commit to 3 or 5. So I don't know yet on that one. A scene, I've got some ideas for a scene, which we'll see if dual diorama remains one category split back into 2. In either case, I've got an idea for one. That's it so far. So like 3, maybe 4 projects that I hope to get cranking on. I have been painting more since this last Adepticon, which is nice. And I mean, but a lot of it's been where I'm just practicing on some stuff, or I've been doing like that Chimera figure, the cat with the elf rider guy. Which is a new challenge. Different sculpting style, different scale.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got some like leopard spots on him now.
Okay.
I did the armor on him and the fabric on the cat, and then I was like, well, I got to do something with this fur. It's sculpted heavily, which can be tricky because they always over sculpt fur, no matter what manufacturer you're talking about. Because fur typically is much smoother. It's a pelt. It's like but on a miniature to give it dimension, they sculpt these like tufts in to it. So now you have to do something with that to make it interesting. And just on the tail, I sort of snow leoparded it a bit, and I like how it's going. Doing that one entirely with the Chimera paints, but yeah, see how the rest of that goes. But I do have to start. Got to start on Golden Demon stuff.
I know.
You just gotta.
Yeah. Is there something you've started that you could turn into a project, or is it something you'd want to start from scratch and with the headspace of this is going to be my competition piece?
So I haven't started anything that I think could be. I mean, maybe there was like from the Age of Sigmar 4th edition starter set, there was the Stormcast Eternal character with the axe on the ground.
Yep.
Like that.
The Lord Terminus.
I did the axe blade in a way that turned out super effective. I could go and pursue that on the rest of the mini, obviously.
But the issue there is you already want to do a different single mini.
Yeah.
So that's like the one category where it's like you already kind of know what you want to do for that one.
Well, in Age of Sigmar in particular, we've said this, and our bias aside, Age of Sigmar just has the best miniatures. Yeah. And I think it's really hard to just pick one. That said, there are aspects of 40k minis that are really fun to paint that you don't get anywhere else, and that's because a lot of their units come with sci-fi armor, and that gives you a lot of opportunities to do volumes and NMM effects and reflective things. So I'm leaning towards one character that we talked about in Age of Sigmar. In 40k, I've got a couple I'm eyeing.
There's the Ascended Minka Lesk that I think was a really cool model that would be fun to paint. So they did Minka Lesk was a Catachan Cadian? No, she's a Cadian character from one of the books, Black Light Red.
Oh yeah,
and they did they're either released or they're going to release. I think they might have released it already. Like a 5-man unit of characters for the newest book, and her newer version is way cooler than their first one. But I think you could do that as like a single instead of doing the unit, and that would be a good one to do there. Really good character
for that. I am excited. It's funny is when I work on other models from other sculpts or other scales, I enjoy them just as much as painting anything, but then it's like there's something about the Games Workshop minis and their scale that when I go back to it, it's just, I don't know. They managed to make the most painter-friendly version of a scale that's supposed to be purely technical and not artistic.
Right.
But they managed to get both out of them. Just the level of detail they're able to get, crisp detail they're able to get in such small scale because of their plastic work. So I'll be excited to start on those again soon. But we do have more videos in the works to come to the YouTube channel.
Yep, so you can definitely check that out.
Which when we showed the Chimera Paints base set, just diluted with water, that actually got a lot of views. The folks on Instagram liked it. I broke it up into a couple of 10-second things and pointed people to it. So yeah, go over there and watch those. And
again, check out Dracoya.com. Use our code
FTG10.
FTG10 for 10% off your Chimera paints and brushes and sets and models, whatever purchases there. Save 10%. Help us out a little bit too.
Yep.
Win-win for everyone. Their brushes, by the way,
spectacular.
Woo.
Yep.
I used that one kind of flat. It's kind of a wider flat number 2.
Yeah, it's a arrowhead or taperhead kind of
cool.
Really neat.
Really like that. That's it's significantly more usable for things I've been focusing on than just the round.
Well, and so for years there's always been a version of brushes called a miniature series like they had that with Winsor Newton a long time ago. And it was a shorter, more tapered head. And the idea was you could get this hyper-focused detail. The drawback to it was it had no belly to hold water and paint, and so it would dry real quick on the tip. And while you could get some precise detail work, you had to be fidgety and clean and wet the brush frequently, or else you just could ruin it real quick, or your paint wouldn't work. These taperhead Chimera brushes managed to combine the belly of a round with that ultra fine, sharp tapered point of the miniature.
Yeah.
And so I think, and that's not a unique thing. I know in artist brushes there were versions of brushes like that, but to bring it over here finally, I think it's just for your all around brush. It's pretty hard to beat.
Like I've been really beating up my Abtalon size 2, and it's starting to feel its age. I still love that brush, but it is starting to age, and I think this Chimera one might be my new like go to all around.
Yep.
So yeah,
it was why like the Raphael 8404s are my favorite. Were same reason. They had a big belly and a really sharp tip, and so you could do such a wide range of work with that. Well, these Chimera ones, the 1 and the 2 of the tapered heads they fill that same role.
Yeah.
So yeah, really excited. Play around with that some more. I could also play around with food.
Yeah. You're not supposed to play with your food, but I could eat.
You're not, but I could eat some.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us for more of our weekly episodes on YouTube podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. You can follow myself and Llama on Instagram. We are at Llama Paints Minis and Hyena Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.